Hello, this is Freethought Forum, a program produced and funded by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. I'm Ralph Eisler.
And I'm Jonas Holdman. We want you to know that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone. Right here in East Tennessee, you can find free-thinking atheists and agnostics. This is a show for them and for people committed to a life rooted in science and free of supernatural beliefs.
Yeah. This is a call-in show. However, we only have one phone, so if you can't get through, we'll invite you to tweet them to us at FFTVKNOX. Now, while we go over a few announcements, we invite you to start calling in now at the number on the screen. Get a pen and paper, and we'll give you our email address later in the show.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville frequently has a fun meetup at a bar or eatery. Tonight's meet is at Barley's in the Old City, starting around 5:30. Look for the silver-jacketed copy of The God Delusion standing upright on the table. And as Matt Dillahunty of the Atheist Experience says, everyone is welcome to our happy hour for food, drink, and conversation. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't.
Yeah, we prefer not. Okay, well, the Rationalists of East Tennessee have several regular monthly meetings. The first and third Sunday mornings are usually lectures and a lively roundtable discussion. The book club meets on the second Sunday, and the Reflections group gets together for a potluck lunch on the fourth Sunday. Now, our RET August 2nd meeting will be at the Cafeteria Annex at Pellissippi State Community College, and we celebrate the birth of Robert Ingersoll, born August 11th, 1833.
But come a little early. We have coffee and usually snacks to eat and conversation.
Right. The program begins at 10:30, but people start drifting in around 10, and we have coffee, and people bring cookies, etc. So anyhow, we'll learn about history, influence, and some readings about Ingersoll, and one from Ingersoll himself, apparently. I didn't know we had that power. But
he overlapped Edison and the phonograph.
Could be. No, I think it's a little before that. And the August 9th book club will feature Sons of Wichita, How the Koch brothers Became America's Most Powerful and Private Dynasty, by Daniel Schulman. You can visit our website for additional details, including times and locations.
Today's topic is abusing science. We have recently seen a number of letters to the editor in our local newspaper by Creationist. In many instances, the writers have tried to show that science or uncertainties in science support their religious beliefs. In all cases, they simply embarrass themselves by showcasing their ignorance about science. So today, we're going to examine some of the misconceptions about science and logic that circulate in East Tennessee. This is what we call abusing science, employing made-up interpretations in attempts to support their theistic preconceptions. But before we discuss these misconceptions, let's look at some items in the news.
Yeah. Last Friday, the Supreme Court of North Carolina delivered a stunning blow to public education and the separation of church and state. In a tellingly partisan 4-3 decision, the court upheld the state's Opportunity Scholarship Program, reversing a trial court's opinion that struck down the program in 2014. North Carolina's Opportunity Scholarship Program is a nationwide voucher scheme that allows eligible families to receive up to $4,200 annually in taxpayer dollars to cover private schools and cost of tuition. Like other voucher schemes, North Carolina's program will siphon tax dollars from public schools that will instead be spent on schools that inculcate religion with no apparent end in sight. And while the court's decision releases more than $10 million in public funds set aside for the public schools, state legislatures are already clamoring for an increase and an expansion of the program. These opportunity scholarships are not part of a public education system. The private schools that receive these funds are not required to be accredited by the state. They're not required to employ teachers or principals who are licensed or who have any particular credentials, degrees, or experience. They're not subject to requirements regarding the curriculum they teach, and they're not required to provide a minimum amount of instructional time, nor are they prohibited from discriminating against applicants or students on the basis of religion. This is a frightening trend, and I see it popping up around the country. And in fact, right here, there's a move to start a vouchers program much more modest than this in Tennessee. But we have to remember the wing of this country, which is mainly controlled by fundamentalist Christians right now, would like nothing better than to see our public school system destroyed and replaced with what I would call Christian madrasas.
Yeah. This troubles me on two accounts, Ralph. First, I think that we as citizens have a responsibility to prepare the next generation to take on the responsibilities of full citizenship. And this raises questions about whether that will be accomplished. Second, there's this whole business about uniform testing. Graduates of our high schools go on to, or would like to go to, colleges and universities and take jobs in other states. So I think there's a responsibility to see that our students are educated at least up to the level to take on these opportunities in other states.
Right. I agree with you. And in fact, that is kind of the focus of our program today. We're going to talk about some letters and people's conceptions. I don't know whether they are all born, raised, and educated in Tennessee, but some of them just don't seem to be educated at all about science. So anyhow, on a more encouraging note.
On a more encouraging note, since our program today is about science, we have had some new and exciting discoveries in the last few days. First, scientists using NASA's planet-hunting Kepler telescope have found a planet beyond the solar system that is a close match to Earth. The planet, which is about 60% bigger than Earth, is located about 1,400 light-years away in the constellation Cygnus. According to NASA, the newly discovered planet, which is called Kepler 452b, is the smallest planet that has been discovered till now orbiting in a habitable zone. A habitable zone consists of an area around a star where liquid water can collect on the surface of an orbiting planet. That means the planet, which is 1,400 light-years away, could offer a glimpse into the Earth's apocalyptic future, scientists said. The planet's star is 4% more massive than the Sun and 10% brighter, 10% brighter. If the planet is rocky, and scientists believe that it has a better than even chance of being just that, then it could be in the midst of a fearful scenario. As the heat from the dying star evaporates Kepler 452b's lakes and oceans. The increasing energy from its aging sun might be heating the surface and evaporating in the oceans. Water vapor would be lost from the planet forever, he added. Kepler 452b, these pages are bound to stick together, experiencing what the sun will undergo in more than 1 billion years from now as our sun ages and grows brighter and expands in size.
Yeah, that's one thing. Remember, we have this SETI, this search for extraterrestrial life, going on, and we think of things being far away and how far away we are when we contact people, but we don't often think about the time factor. I mean, modern humans have been on Earth here for about 200,000 years, and we've only had the technology since the end of World War II to even send out these messages, etc. And like it or not, the human race at some time will disappear from this Earth for one reason or another. So
yeah,
I'm not trying to be.
To send a signal to this planet, assuming that it was received and there was an immediate response, we would be talking like 2,800 years. And 2,800 years, given the record of civilization now, the abuse of the environment and the consumption of unreplaceable resources, makes me wonder if there would be anyone around to hear a response.
Yeah, that's why I say I don't like to be a gloomy Gus, but we have to face up to the fact that we are not forever. There was another interesting discovery made. It's a fossil snake, a snake now, that had 4 legs. And this is the first time scientists have ever found such a creature. And it is interesting. I put it in here because we're going to talk a little bit about the fossil record. And it's just another one of those pieces inside the fossil record that gives you a look into intermediates between fossils that we've already found, etc. So anyhow, the paleontologists just continue to amaze us with their discoveries that produce an ever-increasing justification for biological evolution. And I was watching a program last week that made the point that there have been more different kinds of fossils discovered in the last 30 years than all previous history. So moving right along there with the fossil record.
Yeah, real treasure trove coming out of China.
Yes, those are amazing. I saw that exhibition in San Diego several years ago, and I was absolutely stunned. They're fossils that clearly have feathers. I mean, there's no doubt.
The dinosaurs with feathers.
Yeah, there's no doubt that anybody can use so.
So today we're going to address the manner in which some people try to use science to support their religious claims of the supernatural. About 30 years ago, the philosopher Philip Kitchener wrote a short book called Abusing Science. It dealt with the fact that creationists create pseudoscientific arguments in attempts to support literal interpretations of the Bible. He was mainly referring to people who have some credentials in science or engineering, but who believe the Bible is the final arbiter of how the universe was created and how the various forms of life came into being. So they know the facts of science, but they distort them to fit their religious priorities.
Yeah, so today I don't really want to talk about that kind of creation scientist, as they now like to term themselves particularly, but want to talk about people who really don't know anything about science, but have no qualms about pontificating on it. There have been several letters in the News Sentinel this year that fall into this category, and we're going to refer to them as the basis for our discussing the illiteracy of the American public about basic facts of science. And one might be tempted to say the examples we present represent only a small minority of religionists, those kind of out on the fringe, but I really don't agree with that position. I think those who actually have written letters constitute only the tip of the iceberg instead. The Southern Baptists are the largest Protestant sect in the U.S., and I've looked up several websites for different Baptist churches around, and so far as I can tell, every one of them affirms that the Bible in its original language represents the absolute literal truth.
The creationist arguments are usually directed towards 3 broad areas of understanding. 1, origin and age of the universe. 2, the evolution of life. And 3, abiogenesis, the origin of life from inanimate matter. These are 3 distinct areas of science, but creationists often seem confused and conflate them. Also, in criticizing the science relating to these areas, creationists make several logical errors. Usually they hold to the argument from ignorance that if science can't explain something, a God did it. Their God, of course.
Yes, of course.
And by some sort of magic. From this standpoint, God is simply defined to be a euphemism for human ignorance.
Right, right. So let's look at some concrete examples. This past January, a KNS letter writer claimed that non-theists, that's us, okay, the atheists, must demonstrate how evolution explains the existence of the universe and life on Earth. But evolutionary biology has nothing to do with the origins of life or the origins of the universe. It addresses the mechanisms leading from the earliest primitive cells to the enormous variety of life forms produced over the last 3 to 4 billion years. Been very successful in doing that. And so we may get to a discussion of this later in the show. But the point I want to make is that with all the information available these days in the form of essays on the internet from reputable scientists and books written for the general public, quite readable books, it's almost unbelievable that anyone would think the theory of evolution has anything to do with the origin of the universe. Can you get this? I don't know. So getting back to public education, seeing a failure of public education somewhere along the line here. Anyhow, I think this is simply an indication of what I'll call willful ignorance. I mean, people can be ignorant about something. You don't put them down for that. There are a lot of things I'm ignorant of, okay? And a lot of things I might be willfully ignorant of that I don't have the time or the inclination to try to learn. But I don't make, just fist-pounding pronouncements about those subjects. I have a little more caution, I think. So anyhow, not taking a few minutes to find out what science actually says is not a good idea if you're going to try to make pronouncements, almost like the Pope does. This is what I would call abusing science, making up arguments that use scientific language, but without any scientific content.
Ralph, I think I would want to qualify the word evolution a little bit. And when one says evolution, they're often talking about biological evolution.
Yeah.
But evolution describes the change of things over time. So it is not out of line to talk about evolution of the universe or evolution of social responsibility and justice. And
I understand that, but that's not what the intent of this writer was. It was clearly conflating biological evolution, which he doesn't understand, with other facets of the science.
Well, isn't that what so many of the arguments are about, using words meaning with their own meaning when they know the audience is going to assign a different meaning to those words. But anyway, let's look at some statements that have appeared in the about the origin of the universe. A second Knoxville News Sentinel correspondent recently has written the following. Scientific law states that matter can be neither created nor destroyed. Science also insists that the energy is conserved. Since neither matter nor energy can be eternal, they must both, according to their arguments, have a starting point. However, science prohibits that. Nevertheless, matter and energy exist. Science cannot explain that.
Yeah, that's what the writer says, right? He says that individually matter and energy exists, but he says neither can be eternal. Now, he doesn't know that neither can be eternal, okay? I mean, if you are watching this program a little confused by the writer's statements, you're not alone. How does the writer know that matter and energy cannot be eternal? He doesn't. He just made up that idea. There's nothing in the science that says that it can't be. The best scientific ideas say they're not, but who knows?
Yeah, after all, our machinery, our accelerators can use energy to create lots of particles.
Oh, sure.
More than I could list right now.
You're right, and that's exactly the point. So, yeah, so let's see where the science abuse comes in these statements. First of all, the writer says mass and energy are essentially conserved, but it's been known for over 100 years, since 1905, 1906 anyhow, when Einstein published his equation, E equals mc squared, that mass and energy are equivalent. They're not separately conserved, okay? The sun and stars produce heat and light only because fusion reactions can convert some of that mass to energy. And that's just the point that Jonas was making, too, that for those of you who have watched the Large Hadron Collider work, you know what happens to it? They take these protons in counter-circulating rings and bang them into one another, and they produce new matter, converting that energy from the kinetic energy of their motion into new particles and matter. So, I mean, this is stuff that should be known, I think, you know, pretty widely, but anyhow. And nuclear power plants, same thing. They convert mass to energy by fission reactions, and we all benefit from that right here in Tennessee Valley. So anyone has access to these facts. It's not that they're hidden away in some obscure scientific journal, but the writer apparently has not taken time to learn them. And the second point about this is if the creationist then tries to take some refuge in saying, well, the combination of matter and energy are conserved or cannot be created and destroyed, he really is on kind of slippery ground there. And the reason is that, and I might get in trouble for saying this, people, but the best estimates that cosmologists can make is that the net energy content, the net energy matter content of the universe is quite likely to be zero. And this is because the ordinary matter that we see, say in the stars and the Earth, etc., constitutes about 0.5% of what I'll call the stuff of the universe, ordinary matter that we have. There's about 10 times that amount of ordinary matter in between galaxies. Now, this is mind-blowing when you think of it, because there's a trillion particles, you know, in one little cubic inch of solid material here. And in between stars, what's the density? It's about 1 per cubic meter, 1 particle per cubic meter, something like that. Anyhow, right? Space is big. It's really big. Okay, so so that total then, the ordinary matter only constitutes about 5% of what we have in the universe. There's this stuff called dark matter, and dark matter, we've known that it's existed for a long time, since maybe 1930 or at least 1970s, and dark energy, which was discovered just a couple decades ago, maybe a little less. Okay. So anyhow, this all turns out to be balanced, so far as we can tell, by the gravitational potential energy, which is a negative contribution to total mass energy of the universe. And we could go into trying to explain this, but it's a little complicated for just a talk show like this, and people are going to go out and get the, you know, their cocktail.
Well, it's just that as matter condenses into planets and stars like that, you start off with matter that's distributed, and in the process of collapsing under gravitational attraction, energy is released there. So the energy lost by this gravitational attraction is results in what you referred to as negative energy, if I'm correct.
Yeah. No, I can. I've done this before on this show, but I think I can give a little example, maybe. And that is, if I have this penny here, it's not moving, so it has no kinetic energy. And if we define its gravitational energy to be zero there, if total energy is conserved, and I drop it, right before it hits my hand, it has kinetic energy, which is positive. And so the difference in the potential energy must have been negative. Sort of like that. You have to make the argument a little different when you're talking about the universe and stuff. But anyhow.
Sort of the idea that you could start with nothing and end up with matter and thermal and all other kinds of energy.
Yeah.
It kind of defies, at first thought, kind of defies your imagination. But on the other hand, if you think of, say, atmosphere with water, vapor in it, and it's clear, you can't see it. If you wave your hand, maybe you can feel it, and so on. And under certain conditions, if it's supersaturated, it just looks clear as if nothing is there. But then any kind of disturbance can immediately result in the formation of clouds, kind of like what you see from the contrails from jets that pass in the upper atmosphere. So here, from what looks like nothing, suddenly this water appears, droplets of water, in much the way matter might have appeared at an early stage in
in very early stage, if you take near the origin of the Big Bang, there are no particles, and very rapidly, as the universe expands and cools, then you get these particles sort of condensing out of this elemental stuff. Okay, well, as I say, the idea that the total mass energy of the universe may be zero seems a little strange and it's counterintuitive, but its conclusion is accepted by virtually all cosmologists, and it's consistent with the most widely accepted idea of how the universe came into being, and this is so-called inflationary Big Bang theory. Everybody's heard of the Big Bang. Inflation is just something that explains very many observations in what we see from the Big Bang, and it implies that right after the Big Bang, the universe expanded extraordinarily rapidly, much more rapidly than it is now, and then slowed down to the present rate of expansion. Okay, again, justification for these ideas. We're not sitting here making these up. I mean, it's not like a guy creationist writing a letter. These can be found on the internet or in popular books such as The Universe from Nothing by Lawrence Krauss. And for anybody interested in science rather than a creation caricature of science, one scarcely needs to posit some all-powerful supernatural creator to produce a universe that contains nothing.
But Ralph, yet a third creationist writer scoffs at these ideas, claiming that the fantasies of a creator God concocted by a group of nomads 6,000 years ago are more valid than the ideas and work over centuries of hundreds of educated scientists. Here we have more creationist science abuse. The writer simply doesn't understand dark energy and dark matter, which constitute about 95% of the positive energy component of the universe, as you were saying.
Yeah.
Dark matter is inferred from the rotation patterns of galaxies and gravitational lensing. Dark energy is inferred from the observation that the universe is expanding and the expansion speeding up. This observation resulted in Nobel Prizes in 2011 for two groups who discovered it. Although dark matter and dark energy are not well understood, their effects are well documented. However, this creationist writer states that there's a lot of evidence for these concepts, but they are speculative since they have never been observed. This is one of those not even wrong statements. It is akin to saying that although there is evidence for gravity, it is a speculative concept because no one has ever found a piece of it.
Yeah, it's just the wrong language, right? I mean, it's meaningless.
Or even really waves associating with the...
Yeah.
Okay, but young Earth creationists embarrass themselves when they invoke science to bolster their claims because they don't actually seem capable of understanding it. They would be better served simply by stating they believe in a supernatural God just because they want to do so.
Yeah. The one thing that you will notice is that so many of these creationists try to use science to justify their beliefs. And why do they do that? It's because science has been the most successful way of learning and knowing about the world and how it works. I mean, we see it in everyday life just because we have the technology that's built on those scientific backgrounds, right? Most people don't think about that at all. I mean, the Bible didn't tell you how to build your Apple computer.
I was going to say, there are instances where, due to ignorance about science, honest ignorance, these can lead to wrong conclusions.
Sure.
Like at one point, a prominent scientist did a calculation as to the life of the sun, how long it could be there, assuming that it was burning like fire, burning coal or something like that, and concluded that if it had been composed of something like coal or something combustible, that it would have burned up after something like 4,000 years. But the problem, and it all sounded very good, but the problem is that he didn't understand there was another mechanism, that is the nuclear energy that was acting.
And that's okay because science progresses. It's not that it says something that is absolutely true forever at one time, although I mean, Newton's laws of gravity are not right. We know that Einstein's general relativity is a better representation of gravity, but we can use Newton's laws to send people to the moon or to that probe out to Pluto. It's good enough for that. It's an approximation, but it's a damn good approximation. So that's why science progresses.
I think it's just incredible. I can't conceive how they could control these rockets that so far away, can come so close to Pluto and not get close to it in the first place, but not hit it and everything.
Maybe they have a direct connection to some intelligence that's out there. In any case, it's about time that we take a little mid-program break here. And so...
Okay, in case you're just tuning in, folks, this is Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee. Freethought Forum is funded jointly by them and by individual contributions. Shows are live most every Tuesday from 5 to 6 p.m. Eastern on Community Access Television. You can see it streaming online outside the Knoxville area. Just go to ctvknox.org and just click on the appropriate place and
you'll be able to see it.
Without subscribing to cable.
Yeah, without subscribing. Okay, this is a call-in show, and we're live today on July 28th. And viewers can call in now to the number on the screen or tweet to us at FFTVKNOX.
The Atheist Society of Knoxville, or ASK, meets 2 times a week. We have evening meetups for fun, food, drink, and conversation, and one is going on right now.
Right now.
Ask Purpose is to supply a venue for community camaraderie and outreach to atheists, agnostics, freethinkers, and other like-minded persons in the East Tennessee area.
Yeah, okay. Well,
Sam, could you
run a promotional?
Well, you're not alone. The Atheist Society of Knoxville is a fun and friendly group of people just like you that meets twice a week at a bar or restaurant. We meet every Tuesday night following the show at Barley's Tap Room and Pizzeria for happy hour. You'll find our group either inside or on the patio. Look for Richard Dawkins' silver-jacketed book, The God Delusion, standing upright on the table. On Fridays, we meet at Agave Azul or the Beard and Beer Market. But if you plan to preach, proselytize, provoke, or punch, please don't. We all question what we believe at one point in our lives. If this is the time for you, come join us for food, drink, conversation, and fun. Do you find stories of talking snakes laughable? Do you prefer the scientific method over supernatural beliefs? Are you concerned about religious leaders and organizations imposing their values and rules on your body, your family, and the rest of our society? Well, take comfort in the fact that you're not alone. The Rationalists of East Tennessee meets weekly for fellowship and provides a forum for people who support skeptical thinking and rational discussion of these and other issues. To find out more information or to find out about our next meeting, visit us on the web at www.rationalist.org.
Okay, well, the Rationalists of East Tennessee has Sunday activities, lively presentations and discussions. Once a month we get together for a book club. You need not have read the book to join us, but it helps.
Both the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee help provide a social outlet where you'll find that if you don't believe in God, you're not alone.
Okay. Well, let's get back to the program. We talked a little bit about matter, energy, universe, and origin, etc. But let's get back to talking about some more of these letters that discuss evolution and abiogenesis. So the creationist we cited at the beginning of the program also says that the law of biogenesis states life only comes from pre-existing life. Well, there is no such law. Perhaps people living in the 19th century may have formulated such an aphorism, and I may have even heard that when I was in school many, many years ago. But we're living in the 21st century, and there's no reason to believe it's true, especially in light of all of the progress that's been made in understanding the human life and how we're all built and constructed. Again, it's a case of willful ignorance where creationists make up their own scientific rules. You know, when I went to school, I don't know about you, when I went to school, biology class, I was told that the cell consisted of a nucleus surrounded by a blob of protoplasm. That's all there was. People didn't know anything about cells. Today, you can pick up any biology, high school biology textbook, and you'll find this cell is a marvelous little machine with all these little organs inside it that have different functions. And that's one of the things that, again, I think creationists don't understand, and that is science does move forward. Science learns things, and teaches things. I think they have a hard time understanding that because religion is static. In fact, it's supposed to be static, that everything is supposed to have existed always in the past, always now, and always will exist, so far as their supernatural beliefs go.
Well, Ralph, let me take a little exception here. This
Okay.
Life comes only from pre-existing life.
Mm-hmm.
Now that, up until past year or two, I think is a good rule of thumb that anytime you see a sprout come up out of the ground, it came from pre-existing life, a seed or something like that. But when I was growing up in southern Louisiana, and there were a lot of well-meaning but ignorant people, we were told lots of things. Now, it turns out there was, I've only seen one of them, a worm that is about as thick as a pencil lead and long like this, that you would see occasionally in puddles of water. And I was taught that horsehair, if it fell in a puddle like that, could turn into one of these worms.
Okay.
Now, that's a good place to apply this kind of rule.
Well, I will say that so far it is true that we don't know how life might have arisen from non-life. I think this is probably the best place for creationists to try to plant their feet if they want to make a case, for a supernatural God existing or supernatural creator. But what I'm saying is there is no law that says that's true, just because we haven't seen it. There was no law that said that we couldn't explain the Black Plague, and it had to be a scourge of God. And this has been the history of science, right? Science marches on and tries to understand these problems scientifically, whereas when you can't understand them, the theist will always say, well, if you don't understand it, that's evidence that God did it.
We're coming very close, though, to being able to create life in the laboratory. There have been experiments where you sequence the DNA in the genetic material, find that sequence. But then there have also been other experiments where amino acids and so on can be joined together in the same from a bowl of the stuff in the same sequence that you just observed, and maybe something a little different, and so you can build this stretch of DNA, and as yet this is put in a cell that the nucleus has been removed, so it's essentially dead. It's not something that can reproduce or anything, and this can be inserted in there and produce a viable organism. Now this I think is the terror of some what I would call pseudo bioethicists who say that humans should not be encroaching on God's territory, creating life.
Yeah. Well, okay. I'm not saying that there hasn't been a lot of progress made. I'm not aware. I don't think anybody has shown that you could really build a large protein from scratch. You can build segments of it with putting amino acids together. And there's so much research on this. It's just incredible. Okay, but still nobody has ever come up and, taken these basic fundamental atoms, make molecules, put the molecules together and make life. Do I think they will? I think that it's possible. I'm not sure. Anyhow, let's go on, because this is how we're going to come to our next letter writer here. In fact, while we're putting this program together last week, we were delivered, dare I say, magically, another creationist letter on these subjects after I started writing the program. It appeared last Tuesday, actually, in KNS, right before a letter that I had in on Wednesday. But here's what the other creationist says. He says the fossil record does not support the theory of evolution. And that Darwin realized this. Well, there was no fossil record when Darwin published The Origin of Species. It didn't really start to build up until maybe that was 1859. So it was the 1880s or 90s, particularly by these two guys, Cope and Marsh, it started to find lots of fossils. But anyhow, to say the fossil record doesn't support evolution is just nonsense. As I pointed out before, we have an enormous number and have discovered more in the last 30 years than all the previous ones. So, and I would like to make one thing clear. The fossil record is not necessary to support evolution. But it has become a very important underpinning because it's been fleshed out so much. I mean, we can infer evolution occurred from the similarity in body structure of different animals, and particularly from DNA, as you say. We can now sequence these genomes and look back in time and see where mutation occurred that caused a branching off in different areas of this evolutionary tree. It's absolutely fantastic, and that's only happened in the last 50 or 60 years. DNA structure of DNA was unraveled in 1953 by Watson and Crick.
But you know, one of the principles of science is that if a theory is proposed to something, it must be verified, and typically the verification comes from doing and repeating experiments. Now, for something like the fossil record, there's clearly nothing we can do to experiment with dinosaurs yet, but we can confirm the suppositions that one would derive from the fossil record with a parallel from the DNA. I mean, DNA studies confirm, or they don't disagree in any sense with the fossil records, and the fossil records tend to support the DNA evidence. So, in a sense, by this multi-pronged approach, we satisfy the requirements of the scientific method.
That's excellent, and that does give more support to the whole structure. But the historical sciences, like evolutionary biology or archaeology, even astronomy, you can't repeat the experiments, but you don't have to. I mean, you can still make hypotheses that need to be confirmed. For instance, if evolution is true, there's progress through time, then you expect to find fossils in increasingly higher layers depending upon their complexity in, say, something like Grand Canyon shale when you go up. And that's what you find.
In a sense, our confirmation is the consistency we find by not just looking at a single fossil or in a small area, but through the broad understanding of all of the knowledge that putting things together in a consistent way.
In fact, there's a very nice book by a fellow named Neil Shubin on what he called Your Inner Fish. And it's a discussion of his finding this fossil called Tiktaalik, which is an intermediate between fish and land-based animals. It got sort of fins and it's got sort of legs. It's an intermediate in between. It could do push-ups on that. And one of the interesting things about it was, if you look at the fossil fishes and fossil amphibians and date them, you sort of know in time where that fossil that's in the intermediate should arise. And so what they did was they looked at that and they looked at where there were outcroppings around the world of that age. And they went up to Canada, one of those outcroppings, and that's where they found it. So you don't have to reproduce the experiment. That's a confirmation. Anyhow, this guy that I'm talking about, the just stated, said it doesn't support evolution. That's wrong. And I would recommend that everybody who's interested in this read Donald Prothero's excellent book called Evolution, What the Fossils Say and Why It Matters. Anyhow, this same guy, with whom I've had some interaction in the past, I will admit, says the following: the theory of evolution depends on the efficacy of random mutation of the genome. But Michael Bay's book, The Edge of Evolution, The Search for the Limits of Darwin, shows that random mutation of the genome is not an effective method to fuel evolution. Now, Bay's ideas of irreducible complexity, expressed in his 1996 book, Darwin's Black Box, have long been dismissed as untenable. He's actually somewhat of a pariah among his faculty members at Lehigh University. And Jonas, why don't you read the rather strange description of the Department of Biological Sciences in the catalog. You ought to listen to this. This is really weird.
This is in the university catalog.
Yeah.
The faculty in the Department of Biological Sciences is committed to the highest standards of scientific integrity and academic function. This commitment carries with it unwavering support for academic freedom and free exchange of ideas. It also demands the utmost respect for the scientific method, integrity in the conduct of research, and recognition that the validity of any scientific model comes only as a result of rational hypothesis testing, sound experimentation, and findings that can be replicated by others. So far, so good. After all, every science department should adhere to rigorous canons of research, but then comes a curious disclaimer. The department faculty, then, are unequivocal in their support of evolutionary theory, which has its roots in the seminal work of Charles Darwin and has been supported by findings accumulated over 140 years. The sole dissenter from this position, Professor Michael Behe, is a well-known proponent of intelligent design. While we respect Professor Behe's right to express his views, they are his alone and are in no way endorsed by the department. It is our collective position that intelligent design has no basis in science, has not been tested experimentally, and should not be regarded as scientific.
Isn't that strange? I mean, you could look through every catalog in this country and you won't find anyone that singles out some professor in a department for as being an outlier in some way like that. So, but this is what our creationist friend is citing, this fellow here. Anyhow, what does Behe's 1907 book really say about evolution? I admit I haven't read the book, but here's part of a review by the distinguished evolutionary biologist Jerry Coyne. Coyne says, for a start, let's be clear about what Behe now accepts about evolutionary theory. He has no problem with a 4.5 billion year old Earth, nor with evolutionary change over time, nor apparently with its ample documentation through the fossil record, the geographical distribution of organisms, the existence of vestigial traits testifying to ancient ancestry, and the finding of fossil missing links that show common ancestry among major groups of organisms. Behe admits that most evolution is caused by natural selection, and that all species share common ancestors. He even accepts the one fact that most other ideas would rather die than admit, and that is that humans shared a common ancestor with chimpanzees and apes. So why does Behe come clean about all this? The reason's plain. There's simply too much evidence for any science to deny these facts without losing all credibility. So Behe then finds his bugbear in evolutionary theory of random mutation provides raw material for evolutionary change. He thinks God has to stick his finger in it sometime. And he does this mostly by discussing malaria, protozoan disease in human beings, sickle cell anemia and things of that sort. They have developed to kind of combat malarial infection. But it seems kind of a strange, it's much like he did with the bacterial flagellum in Darwin's black box. The bacterial flagellum became the poster boy for intelligent design. Now, I have a hard time believing that if there's a God, that's the best example he could give of his interaction in the world, is this little bacterial flagellum. Anyhow, even this discussion that he has in this more recent book has been thoroughly discounted by several scientists, including Kenneth Miller, who's a strong defender of evolutionary theory, but at the same time he's a devout Roman Catholic who even believes in miracles.
So it's not clear that our creationist has even read Behe's book or the reviews, although he cites it as totally disproving disproving that random mutation and natural selection cannot provide the mechanism for evolution. This is a prime example of abusing science by making a public statement that science does not support. Let's look now to his comments about the origin of life. This is the only area where creationists can gain foothold because of the lack of scientific knowledge. No one has shown how life actually evolved from non-living matter. Our creationist says, regarding the origin of life, everything in nature proceeds to the most stable configuration, chemical equilibrium. The most stable configuration for amino acids, the constituents of proteins, is in a natural setting, is individual amino acids, not proteins. Nature cannot build a biologically meaningful protein. The statement of chemistry is absolute. Life is not a natural phenomenon, and for a living organism, all constituents have to be in place at once. Nothing less will survive the inexorable laws of chemical equilibrium or natural selection.
Yeah, what this guy is saying, that you can't build step by step a protein, okay, which we know is what we need, what we are made of, okay? And because he has this idea that everything settles into a chemical equilibrium state. Now, let's consider this a little bit. If we were in chemical equilibrium with our surroundings, we would be dead. Living systems are not in chemical equilibrium with their surroundings. His idea is this: suppose you have two states of a system called A and B, and chemical equilibrium, the going from A to B is has a certain rate, and going from B to A has a certain rate backwards, and so you get a balance between these two, A and B. And he says, well, once you get to B, you always go back to A. But suppose you have three systems, A, B, C, so the rate going from A to B and then going from B to C is much faster. So you can't go back to A, so you can have a system that builds up gradually. And that's obviously what can happen in nature, which does happen, as I say, because we would not be here if it were not for facts like that. And for those of you who are interested in really reading about systems, the most prominent one is so-called ATP, ADP cycle. It's called adenosine triphosphate or adenosine diphosphate cycle, which gives the energy to all living creatures. And we are just not in chemical equilibrium. And there's a whole field of non-equilibrium thermodynamics and discussion of irreversible thermodynamic processes that I would suggest the creationists look up. They might be a little beyond the learning, but this guy, I think, is a chemical engineer, so he has no excuse for this. Okay.
Well, Ralph, we have about 40 seconds left.
40 seconds, so it's time to start wrapping things up. Get out your pen and paper.
And this has been Freethought Forum, a program by the Atheist Society of Knoxville and the Rationalists of East Tennessee.
Please send us feedback. Leave voicemail at 865-270-9060 or email us at freethoughtforum@yahoo.com.
You can see this show most Tuesdays from 5 to 6 p.m. On your local television channel or streaming live to the world.
Right. And so our thanks to Sam and to our telephone
Forrest.
monitors and for our